This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening.
Good evening. A select committee has made another strong attack on a minister. This time, it's Mr. Dennis Howell.
The BBC strike is over. They'll pay 16.5%. The petrol drivers settled, but that's secret. If you want to ask a policeman, try the West End. We captured the moon, but what did we do with it? At London Airport, Christmas is fogged off. Good evening. The BBC's strike over pay is over. Ford and Ripon are fired from breakfast television. They're talking at Cowley, but it's hard bargaining. Maggie says she may, or just may not. Warsaw's last Jews remember the ghetto's last fight. And Aberdeen are in their first European final. Good evening. Mr. DL calls Mrs. Thatcher a crook, and he's expelled. The Education Secretary faces a new tussle with the teachers. The Essex police must explain their failure in the Bamber case. Foreign fishermen are told steer clear of the Falklands. And we've reason to believe you're only here for the grass. Today, can the Syrians free the hostages tomorrow? Mr. Kinnock tells Mrs. Thatcher, you've put Britain up for sale. How Mr. Gorbachev is getting rid of the Soviet old guard. Labour's Mr. Ron Brown has something to say to his constituents. And the fun of the fair is to be safer too. Good evening.
Headquarters of ITN, News at 10, with John Suchet.
Lamont calls again for a firmer lead from Major. Unemployment up again. Is the recovery faltering? Florida victim offers her help in murder hunt. And Jackson gives hope to a sick Moscow child. Good evening. The former Chancellor Norman Lamont spoke out again tonight about government policy, saying a firmer line should be taken against any suggestion of European monetary union.
From the headquarters of ITN, News at 10, with Trevor McDonald.
British tourists killed in holiday helicopter crash. Europe tells Major, don't blackmail us over voting. Under fire, the frightening legacy of TV crime shows. And a sparkling return, the crown jewels as you've never seen them before. Good evening. 6 British tourists sightseeing in Transylvania in Romania were killed today when their helicopter fell out of the sky and onto a mountainside.
From ITN News at 10 with Trevor McDonald.
Clinton breaks his long silence about Monica Lewinsky. After the leak, Lawrence informants forced from their homes. Prayers in school as the E. coli outbreak spreads. What Lasso and Fowler are saying to each other tonight. Turning back the clock to bid farewell to News at 10. Good evening.
Anger as Private Clegg is cleared of murder. Set to halve in price the cost of many everyday drugs. Lennox Lewis weighs in tonight for the fight of his life. And Hollywood's first couple fly in to pay tribute to a movie genius.
From ITN, the ITV Nightly News with Dermot Murnaghan.
Good evening.
Chancellor hints at tax rises to pay for the NHS. The climactic gun battle at Mazar-e-Sharif. Britain's charged with spying in Greece, kept in custody. And action from tonight's Worthington Cup games.
From ITN, the ITV News at 10 with Katie Derham.
Good evening. The Chancellor today committed the government to more spending on the health service of the future.
First signs of war. Has the attack already begun? Troops massed tonight on the Iraq-Kuwaiti border. Bombs loaded onto B-52s ready for shock and awe.
Yeah, it's hammer time, okay?
And anti-war protests turn angry across Britain.
The ITV News at 9 with Trevor McDonald in Kuwait and John Suchet in London.
Good evening from Kuwait City, where tonight, 4 hours ahead of the deadline set by President Bush, there are signs that war on Iraq could have already begun. Election battle lines are drawn. Letwin and Brown clash over spending. But if their sums do add up, how many jobs in the public service will have to go? Also tonight, Tutu's attack on Blair. The Iraq war was immoral and the PM should apologize. The Penrith rail tragedy. It had happened before. And the dangerous alcohol craze that's about to sweep Britain.
And in the northwest, a mother lays her 3 young daughters to rest. She tried in vain to save the girls from a fire at their home in Lancashire a week ago.
Good evening. A key battleground for the next election was mapped out today. How much of our taxes should go on public services?
Stamping his authority. While Blair's away, Brown stakes his claim to the top job. A big speech and some heavy lobbying helps push through the government's controversial plans for ID cards. But tonight the question is, who's really running Britain? The Chancellor helped defuse a potential rebellion over the controversial plans while his boss was trapped in South Africa. So have we seen Gordon Brown start to throw his political weight around? Also tonight, under investigation, the MOD named the regiment at the centre of the Iraq scandal. City limits, the women claiming discrimination for sexism in the city.
There are situations where you feel a man would never speak to another man in the same way as he can address and undermine and perhaps bully a woman.
And Dick's duck shoot, how America's vice president caught a colleague in his sights.
And in the northwest, shocked to death, a father of 4 dies of a heart attack after a break-in at his home.
Good evening. Gordon Brown went public today in his attempt to change his identity.
It's confirmed the most virulent form of bird flu is back in Britain. The strain found on a farm in Suffolk is H5N1. Tonight, halting the virus as much of East Anglia becomes a restricted zone. The outbreak is being linked to cases in the Czech Republic and Germany. Wild birds seem the likeliest source. We investigate how difficult it will be to contain. Also on the programme. Family tragedy. A couple and 3 of their children are killed in a house fire. 2 more of their children are missing.
I felt sick just at the thought of it. To think that there's wee children and get out.
Raising the stakes, Benazir Bhutto calls on Musharraf to quit as her protest march is thwarted by police. And the reverse ripple effect. We reveal where house prices are falling fastest. Good evening. The worst kind of bird flu is back in Britain. The virus found at a turkey farm in Suffolk was confirmed today as the deadly H5N1 strain. £4 million, the ransom demanded tonight by Somali pirates as their British hostages reveal the strain of their ordeal.
Thank you very much. Please give our love especially to Paul Forden. We miss him very much.
For the second day running, News at 10 has managed to speak to the Chandlers, this time to Rachel, who broke down as she said she and her husband Paul were bearing up.
Also on the programme, sacked tonight, the government drugs advisor who said ecstasy was less harmful than alcohol. Postal misery, union leaders announced yet more strikes as the backlog of letters tops 35 million. And saving Sophie, cash pours in for the little girl who needs £500,000 for cancer treatment in America.
Good evening. Within the last hour, it's emerged that pirates holding a British couple captive in Somalia have demanded a ransom of more than £4 million. The ultimate sacrifice of a soldier who saved countless lives, killed by a Taliban bomb days before he was due to see his wife and his son.
This is the ITV News at 10 with Mark Austin and Julie Etchingham.
Staff Sergeant Olaf Schmidt spoke to ITV News before leaving for Afghanistan. He died defusing one more bomb before coming home. Also tonight, breeding terror inside the most lawless country on earth and why it could pose the greatest threat to Britain's safety. And...
Oh, that's amazing. Brilliant.
The chance of life, the moment this little girl's mum found out a dream had come true for her daughter.
New arrival, Wayne Rooney leaves hospital tonight after becoming a dad.
Good evening. The widow of a soldier killed by a Taliban bomb paid tribute to the bravery of her husband tonight, but she said the pain of loss is overwhelming.
Predatory and pervasive, the appalling scale and nature of Savile's sex abuse revealed. But never charged, never prosecuted. He was the monster everyone knew who hid in plain sight.
I think we were all taken in. You could say he groomed a nation.
This is the ITV News at 10 with Alistair Stewart and Natasha Kaplinsky.
The Crown Prosecutor and the police apologise for years of inaction and say it is a watershed. For Savills victims, the relief of being believed at last. Also on the programme, job shock in manufacturing as Honda sack 800 in the face of falling demand across Europe.
On the high street too, nearly 1,500 Gert Jessops. A fresh warning tonight of a shrinking economy.
2 middle-aged men stabbed to death in Birmingham city centre as rush hour crowds look on.
Syrian rebels celebrate the capture of one of President Assad's key air bases, a major blow to his regime.
And Kate says her first portrait is amazing. Others are less generous.
It's the kind of image, in fact, that you might see in a high street photographer's window.
Good evening. The hideous Jekyll and Hyde nature of Jimmy Savile's life was confirmed today in reports by the police and the NSPCC.
The biggest shake-up of pensions in a generation, but the government is accused of a short-term fix with long-term pain for many.
Also tonight, HMV, the latest high street name to call in the administrators.
Disgraced cyclist Lance Armstrong says sorry to his charity.
And Britain slides into winter. The big freeze that could last a fortnight brings snow and ice to much of Britain.
This is ITV News at 10 with Mark Austin and Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. The changes to the state pension set out today by the government will hit more people than it will help, according to independent economists.
Slow but irreversible. The Prime Minister confirmed today he'd be easing restrictions cautiously, but he insisted this lockdown should be the last.
We want this lockdown to be the last, and we want progress to be cautious but also irreversible.
Also on News at 10 tonight. They promise all the over 50s vaccinated by the end of April, but at the current rate it should be quicker than that. So what is the potential delay?
This side is the closet, and then the bathroom is very, very basic.
Hotel quarantine begins for arrivals from red list countries. Harry and Meghan agree a sit-down interview with Oprah to talk about everything. Yikes. As protests grow, Myanmar's military extend the detention of the nation's democratic leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. The triumph of the human sausage. Joss Stone on winning ITV's hit show, The Masked Singer.
I'm going to base all my decisions on like a happiness scale. And if it's over 5, I'll do it. And if it ain't, I'm not going to do it.
And Larry the Downing Street Cat celebrates 10 years, vanquishing all enemies.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening.